Okay, let's unpack this. Think about the last time you felt unwell. Maybe a weird symptom popped up, something didn't feel quite right. What was your first move? If you're like most of us, you probably grabbed your phone or hopped on your computer and headed straight for the internet.
Uh-huh. Straight to Dr. Google.
Exactly. You start typing in your symptoms, and suddenly you're drowning in lists of possibilities, forum posts from strangers, and medical jargon that might as well be in a foreign language.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
You click, you scroll, you worry, and more often than not, you end up feeling way more confused and anxious than when you started.
It's a relatable scenario, isn't it? You're seeking clarity and reassurance, but the current landscape of online health information is largely static. It gives you facts, symptom checkers, lists of diseases,
Right.
but it doesn't interact with you in a meaningful way. It can't ask you a follow-up question based on your unique situation. It lacks that fundamental human element of a conversation that a doctor uses to understand what's truly going on.
Exactly. It's the difference between reading a medical textbook and actually talking to a skilled clinician. Now, picture something radically different.
Okay.
Imagine if, in that moment of feeling unwell, you could open an app, and instead of scrolling through generic lists, you started talking to something that felt, well, like a doctor.
Interesting.
It greets you warmly, asks you how you're feeling, and then, crucially, it listens. It asks thoughtful, specific follow-up questions based on your responses.
So it's adapting to what I'm saying.
Precisely. It probes deeper into your symptoms, understands your concerns, clarifies what you mean, and guides the conversation just like an experienced physician would, all with the goal of understanding your situation and figuring out what might be happening.
That capability moving from static information to dynamic, empathetic clinical dialogue is really the holy grail for a significant portion of medical AI research right now.
Yeah.
It targets the very core of how medicine is practiced.
And that vision is driving a project we're diving into today, the Articulate Medical Intelligence Explorer, or AE.
AMIE.
This is a research initiative from Google Research and DeepMind that's captured a lot of attention recently. We've been digging through a stack of sources on AME research papers, articles discussing its implications, internal notes on its development and capabilities.
And our mission in this deep dive is to unpack all of that for you. We'll explore the critical global need AME is designed to address, the innovative technical approach they took to build a conversational diagnostic AI.
Which sounds fascinating.
Oh, it is. Then there are the truly surprising results from a major evaluation that compared it to human doctors.
That's the part that really jumped out at me.
Yeah, definitely caused a stir. We'll also cover recent advancements that make it even more powerful, how it stacks up against other medical AI efforts, the significant real-world challenges it faces, because there are many.
Always.
And finally, the potential future this kind of technology could open up for healthcare worldwide.
So let's jump in. The starting point for why a project like AME is so important lies in a fundamental challenge facing healthcare systems everywhere.
It's a global problem with profound consequences. The sources highlight a pervasive and worsening shortage of medical expertise.
We hear about this all the time.
We do. And we're not talking about just rare specialists. In many parts of the world, and even in well-resourced countries, there simply aren't enough primary care physicians, nurses, and other clinicians to meet the demand. Populations are growing, getting older, and managing more chronic conditions, all of which puts immense pressure on an already stretched workforce.
Which leads to?
Well, results in long wait times to see a doctor, delays in diagnosis and treatment, and significant health disparities based on where you live or your ability to access care. It's a major bottleneck.
And even when you do manage to get an appointment, the quality of that interaction can be incredibly variable.
That's a really key point. Not every consultation is as thorough, as clear, or as patient-centered as it could be. Doctors are often under immense time pressure, right? They might be fatigued, juggling complex cases.
Yeah, you can feel rushed sometimes.
Exactly. And the level of history-taking or explanation a patient receives can differ significantly from one encounter to the next. It's just variable.
This variability points directly to the critical role of the clinical consultation itself, and specifically the patient history.
Yes. That conversation a doctor has with you, asking questions about your symptoms, how long you've had them, your past health, your lifestyle. It's not just small talk. It is the bedrock of diagnosis.
The foundation.
Absolutely. The sources cite a remarkable statistic. An estimated 60% to 80% of diagnoses can be made based purely on the information gathered during this history-taking dialogue alone.
60 to 80%, just from the conversation.
Just from the conversation, before any tests, any scans, just talking and listening.
That's astonishing. It really underlines that getting the diagnosis right isn't just about ordering tests or having encyclopedic knowledge.
Yep.
It's fundamentally about the skill of asking the right questions, listening carefully, and synthesizing that information through conversation.
Precisely. And that is the core insight AMIE was built upon. The goal was to replicate and scale this fundamental process, the medical dialogue.
Okay.
To create an AI that can conduct a thorough, accurate, and empathetic history, providing world-class diagnostic guidance as a first step, especially in areas where human experts are scarce.
So democratizing that initial assessment.
That's the ambition. To make high-quality initial medical assessment more universally accessible by capturing the essence of that crucial doctor-patient conversation.
So if the conversation itself is so key, how did the researchers build an AI that could actually have a medical conversation like a doctor? What's the technical foundation under the hood?
Right, let's get into the tech. At its core, AMIE is built on a large language model, an LLM.
Like the ones we hear about powering chatbots and search engines.
Exactly. Think of this as a massive neural network trained on vast amounts of text data, giving it a deep understanding of language, facts, and patterns. The initial version of AMIE started with a sophisticated LLM variant developed by Google, specifically fine-tuned for this medical application.
But simply having a powerful LLM isn't enough to be a doctor, right?
Not at all. An LLM can generate text, it can answer questions, but it doesn't inherently reason like a clinician, or prioritize questions in a diagnostic flow, or show empathy in a structured way.
It needs more structure, more medical intelligence baked in.
Exactly. And this is where the innovative architecture comes in. The researchers developed what they call a dual agent design.
Dual agent, okay.
You can imagine it as having two specialized parts working together seamlessly, almost like the analogy they use is like a doctor and an attending physician collaborating within one mind.
A doctor and an attending. Okay, I like that. Like a junior doctor consulting with the senior one constantly.
Sort of, but happening simultaneously and integrated. One part focuses on the interaction, the other on the medical problem solving.
Okay, let's break down those two parts. What does the first one do?
First, there's the dialogue agent. This is the public-facing part, the one that interacts directly with you, the patient. Its primary role is to manage the conversation.
The front end.
Right. It's designed to be empathetic, use clear and accessible language, ask follow-up questions that flow naturally, clarify any ambiguities in your responses. So when you say dizzy, do you mean lightheaded or like the room is spinning? That kind of thing.
Ah, clarification. Important.
Crucial. And generally maintain good bedside manner, even in a text-based format. It's focused on building rapport and gathering information effectively through natural dialogue.
Okay, that's the dialogue agent. And the second
That's the management or reasoning agent. This part operates behind the scenes. Its job is the heavy clinical lifting.
The brains of the operation.
You could say that. It takes the information gathered by the dialogue agent, processes it, consults its vast medical knowledge, clinical guidelines, disease profiles, research findings, and uses sophisticated reasoning to generate a list of potential diagnoses.
The differential diagnosis.
Exactly, the differential. It weighs the likelihood of each based on the symptoms and plans the next steps, such as what additional questions are needed to narrow down the possibilities or what initial advice might be appropriate.
So the dialogue agent is the empathetic interviewer, asking the questions smoothly. And the management agent is the clinical brain, analyzing the data, figuring out the possibilities, and deciding what question to ask next.
Precisely. And the genius of the design is how they communicate. They share information via a constantly updated state, essentially a dynamic summary of everything learned about the patient's case so far.
A shared whiteboard, almost.
Kind of, yeah. As the dialogue agent collects new information from the patient's responses, it updates this shared state. The management agent then uses this updated state to refine its differential diagnoses and determine the most relevant next question. This ensures the conversation is always purposeful, guided by the underlying diagnostic process, not just random chatting.
That makes perfect sense. It's a structured medical interview, but it feels natural because the dialogue agent is handling the human-like interaction layer.
Exactly.
But how do you train an AI to perform such complex medical reasoning and nuanced dialogue across thousands of different conditions? That sounds incredibly challenging to do with standard training data.
And that brings us to one of the most innovative aspects of AME's development, the training approach. Standard datasets of doctor-patient conversations are limited, and often not detailed enough. So they used a sophisticated self-play simulation environment.
Self-play, like AI playing games against itself.
Very similar concept, yes. Think of it like the analogy often used is a flight simulator specifically designed for medical consultations.
A medical flight sim. Okay, that really helps visualize it. So the AI is practicing medicine in a simulator.
Pretty much. It allows the AI to practice conducting consultations in a safe virtual setting, iterating and improving constantly, thousands of times.
How does the self-play part work in this context?
The researchers leveraged the power of the LLM itself to role-play. They would create a simulated scenario where one instance of the LLM was instructed to act as a patient with a specific set of symptoms corresponding to a particular medical condition.
So one AI pretends to be sick.
Right. And another instance of the LLM was then tasked with acting as the doctor, attempting to interview this simulated patient to arrive at a diagnosis.
Wow.
This process generated an enormous volume of simulated dialogues, covering a wide spectrum of conditions and patient presentations, far more than you could ever collect from real-world recordings.
So the AI is essentially practicing being both the patient and the doctor to learn the dynamics of the conversation.
Exactly. It learns the patterns of how symptoms are described for different conditions and the effective questioning strategies to uncover those patterns. What works, what doesn't, how to probe gently, how to clarify.
But how do you ensure the AI doctor is actually getting better, not just practicing bad habits?
Good question. That's where another key component comes in, an in-context critic. This was a third AI agent within the simulation whose role was to act as reviewer, or maybe like that senior attending physician again.
The supervisor AI.
Sort of.
Uh-huh.
It would analyze the dialogue generated by the AI doctor and AI patient, identify weaknesses in the history taking, potential inaccuracies in the reasoning, missed opportunities for clarification, or even issues with tone or empathy, and provide detailed feedback.
Like grading the AI doctor's performance on each simulated case.
Exactly like that. Pointing out, you should have asked about family history here, or your explanation wasn't clear enough, or you missed a key symptom the patient mentioned earlier.
And that feedback is used to improve the AI doctor.
Precisely. This created a powerful, iterative learning loop. The AI would generate dialogue, receive criticism from the critic about its performance, and then this feedback was used to refine the AMIE model through a reinforcement learning strategy. Retraining, basically.
So practice, critique, refine, repeat. Thousands of times.
Exactly. This approach allowed them to scale the training process dramatically, enabling the AI to practice and learn from thousands upon thousands of diverse clinical scenarios much faster and more efficiently than relying solely on limited data sets of human-to-human medical conversations. They mentioned it could simulate thousands of cases nightly.
Thousands per night. That's incredible scale. Using AI to generate and critique training data for itself. Were there other sources of medical knowledge involved too, or was it all simulation?
No, the self-play simulation was a core innovation for conversational skill and clinical reasoning. But the AI also needed a deep foundation of medical knowledge. You can't just learn medicine from conversations alone.
Right, it needs textbook knowledge too.
Absolutely. So they fine-tuned the underlying LM on vast medical text data sets. This included digital textbooks, scientific research papers, official clinical guidelines, medical encyclopedias, and even materials used for medical board exam preparation. A huge corpus of established medical fact. They also incorporated some anonymized data from real clinical interactions, like transcripts of actual consultations or electronic health record notes, to help ground the AI in real-world medical language and workflows. But the sheer volume and diversity of conversational practice came largely from that self-play simulation.
Okay, so it's got this massive medical knowledge base, and it's trained through this innovative simulation to have conversations. How does it internally process information and arrive at conclusions during a consultation? Does it just spit out an answer?
No, and this is another important aspect for accuracy and transparency. It uses an internal reasoning process, often described as a chain of thought mechanism.
Chain of thought, like thinking step by step.
Exactly. Before AMIE generates its response to the patient, whether it's asking the next question, suggesting a diagnosis, or providing advice, it internally generates a step-by-step thought process first.
What does that look like internally?
It's like a human doctor quickly running through their mental checklist or jotting down notes. Okay, patient reports symptom A and symptom B. Given their age and history, the main possibilities are X, Y, and Z. Symptom C, which they just mentioned, makes Y less likely. I need to ask about symptom D next to help differentiate between X and Z before I suggest anything. It maps out the logic.
So it's not just producing a response, it's showing its work to itself internally, like self-auditing.
Exactly. It's a form of internal self-auditing or self-reflection. The sources note that generating this explicit chain of thought before producing the final output significantly improves the accuracy and logical coherence of AMIE's responses. It helps the AI connect the dots and catch potential inconsistencies in its own reasoning.
That seems crucial for complex medical problems.
It is, and what's particularly compelling is that AMIE can often reveal this internal reasoning process if asked, or sometimes proactively. It can justify why it's asking a certain question or why it's considering a specific diagnosis, sometimes even citing the specific guidelines or pieces of medical knowledge that support its thinking.
That's powerful transparency. It's like peeking at the doctor's mental notepad during the visit, which you rarely get.
Right. It offers a level of justification that, frankly, even human doctors under time pressure might not always articulate fully.
Okay, so they built this incredibly sophisticated system with a dual-agent architecture, trained it using this flight sim self-play method, and incorporated this internal chain of thought reasoning. Impressive stuff. But the real test is, how did it perform when compared to actual human doctors? This leads us to that benchmark evaluation that really sent a shockwave through the field.
This was the critical acid test, detailed in a recent publication that garnered significant attention in major journals. The researchers designed a major evaluation specifically to pit AMIE head-to-head against practicing human physicians in a controlled, rigorous setting.
Okay, setting the stage. What did this head-to-head comparison look like? How did they ensure a fair fight, so to speak?
It was designed as a randomized, double-blind crossover trial. Very rigorous methodology. They recruited a group of practicing primary care physicians, I think around 20 of them.
Okay.
And instead of using real patients for this initial test, which would have been ethically complex and difficult to standardize, they used trained, standardized patient actors.
Ah, actors pretending to be patients, like they use in medical school exams.
Exactly. These are professional actors skilled at portraying medical conditions according to detailed scripts. This allowed the researchers to ensure that every doctor and AMIE interacted with the exact same case scenario, presented consistently every time. Same symptoms, same history details.
So level playing field in terms of the case itself. And the format was text-based chat?
Yes, the consultations took place via a text-based chat interface. This format was chosen partly because it's where many initial AI interactions happen, like symptom checkers or chatbots, and it allowed for precise recording and analysis of every word exchanged.
Makes sense for research. And double-blind.
Crucially, yes. Neither the standardized patient actors interacting with the participants, nor the independent medical experts who later reviewed the consultation transcripts, knew whether they were engaging with or evaluating a human doctor or AMI.
So nobody knew who was who. That prevents bias.
Essential for preventing bias in the assessments. Everyone was just evaluating the quality of the consultation itself.
Okay, so you had human doctors and AMIE conducting text-based chats with scripted actors, all blinded. Then experts and the actors themselves rated the consultations. What exactly were they rating? What were the criteria?
They developed a comprehensive evaluation rubric. This wasn't just about, did it get the diagnosis right?
Right.
It assessed the entire clinical process and the quality of the interaction.
Holistic view.
Very much so. The rubric was inspired by standard checklists used in medical training and exams, like Objective Structured Clinical Examinations or OSCEs. It covered a wide range of criteria, separated into clinician-centered measures, evaluating the medical quality, and patient-centered measures, evaluating the interaction from the patient's perspective.
Okay, give me some examples. What kinds of specific things were they looking at on the clinician side?
On the clinician side, assessed by independent specialist doctors, criteria included the thoroughness and effectiveness of history taking. Did they ask the right questions, cover all the bases, diagnostic accuracy, appropriateness of the suggested management plan, the quality of clinical reasoning shown in the dialogue, safety considerations, and the justification provided for their approach. There were 32 distinct criteria in total.
32 measures of clinical skill. And on the patient side, rated by the actors.
Yes, assessed by the patient actors themselves. Criteria here focused on the interaction quality. Things like communication clarity, empathy, reassurance, politeness, respect, how well their concerns were addressed, whether they felt listened to, and overall satisfaction with the interaction. There were 26 criteria on this side.
26 measures of bedside manner and communication. So it was a really thorough evaluation looking at medical skill and the human element. Okay, the moment of truth. How did AMIE compare to the human doctors on this rigorous test?
The results were, frankly, remarkable and surprised many in the medical and AI communities. Let's start with diagnostic accuracy, which is often the headline figure.
Okay.
Across the diverse range of cases tested, AMIE achieved higher diagnostic accuracy than the human primary care physicians participating in the study.
Higher accuracy, significantly.
Yes, significantly higher.
Okay.
And this wasn't just about getting the single top diagnosis right more often. It was also significantly better at including the correct diagnosis within its top few possibilities, what they call top accuracy. The data showed AMIE's performance curve consistently above the human doctors. This difference was statistically significant, suggesting it wasn't just random chance or a fluke.
Wow. And this included cases where the correct answer was that nothing was seriously wrong, right? That's important too.
Yes, that's a very important point the researchers highlighted. AMI was also more accurate at identifying when there wasn't a serious medical condition present, correctly diagnosing no diagnosis needed, or identifying benign conditions more often than the human doctors.
So it's better at finding issues and better at reassuring when there isn't one in this simulated setting.
In this setting, yes. That ability to accurately rule things out is crucial for avoiding unnecessary worry or further costly investigations.
Okay, higher diagnostic accuracy. What about all those other evaluation criteria? The 32 clinical ones and 26 patient ones.
This is where the results were perhaps even more striking, maybe even counterintuitive. Looking at the clinician-rated axes, the 32 criteria assessing medical quality and process-independent expert reviewers rated AME's consultations as superior to the human doctors on 30 out of 32 axes.
Wait, 30 out of 32?
30 out of 32. On the remaining two, it was rated as non-inferior, meaning statistically equivalent.
That's almost a clean sweep on the clinical side. Superior on things like history taking, reasoning, management plan.
Pretty much everything they measured on the clinical quality side.
Okay, what about the patient perspective? The empathy, communication. Surely the humans won there.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But no. From the patient actor's perspective, AMIE performed equally impressively, if not more so. On the 26 criteria assessing the patient experience, things like communication, empathy, and rapport, AMI was rated as superior on 25 axes.
25 out of 26?
25 out of 26. It tied the human doctors on only one measure related to explaining the condition.
So if you combine both sets of criteria.
If you combine both clinician and patient-rated axes, AMI outperformed the human doctors on approximately 94% of the total evaluation axes in this study. It was rated higher nearly across the board.
94%, including things like empathy and reassurance. That's the part that blows my mind. How did an AI manage to score so high on empathy compared to real doctors?
It really speaks to the specific training approach and maybe the limitations of text-based interaction. While human empathy is complex and involves much more than just language, tone, body language, shared experience, AMIE was explicitly trained, particularly through that self-play simulation and feedback from the critic agent, to use language patterns consistently associated with empathy, active listening, reassurance, and respect.
So learn the words of empathy very well.
Exactly. It can be programmed to consistently express understanding. I hear that this has been difficult for you. Validate concerns. That sounds really uncomfortable. Use polite phrasing. Could you tell me more about? And crucially, it never shows signs of fatigue, distraction, or impatience, which perhaps human doctors typing quickly in a chat might inadvertently convey.
That's a fair point. Consistency.
And the patient actors, who were blinded, perceived these consistent linguistic cues as more empathetic and reassuring than the human doctor's responses in that specific text-only format.
That's fascinating. It highlights that empathy in this limited text context can be effectively simulated and perceived through carefully constructed dialogue. Okay, what about the safety of its recommendations? Better diagnosis is great, but were its plans safe?
Another critical aspect. While the study used actors, so no real treatment was given, specialist physicians did review the management plans suggested by AMIE for appropriateness and safety based on the case details.
Yeah.
They found AMIE's suggested plans to be not only appropriate, but often more aligned with current clinical guidelines than those proposed by the human doctors in the study. In follow-up analysis cited in the sources, AMIE's plans adhered to established medical guidelines significantly more often.
More guideline adherent. That suggests more evidence-based care.
Potentially, yes. And here's a compelling finding. When those blinded specialist reviewers were asked which treatment plan they would prefer for a family member facing the same scenario based purely on the transcript, They chose AMIE's plan 5 times more often than the human doctor's plans.
5 times more often. Wow, that's a strong endorsement from experts, even if hypothetical.
It's a very strong signal about the perceived quality and safety of the AI's output in this evaluation.
Okay, these are incredibly strong findings for a research system tested against human professionals. Potentially better diagnosis, better perceived empathy, safer plans according to experts. But any study has limitations, right? We need to be cautious. What are the key caveats to interpreting these results?
Absolutely, and the researchers themselves were careful to point them out. This is crucial context. The most significant limitation is the study format. Text-based chat with standardized patient actors.
Right. Not real patients, not real-world conditions.
Exactly. Human doctors typically consult face-to-face or via video voice, where they can pick up on crucial nonverbal cues, tone of voice, and have a much more fluid, dynamic conversation. The text format might have put the human doctors at a disadvantage.
How so?
Well, typing extensive empathetic responses takes time and effort. One co-author noted that human physicians might get tired or less detailed when typing long answers compared to speaking naturally, while the AI, of course, doesn't fatigue and can generate perfect text instantly.
So the environment itself might have favored the AI's capabilities in text generation and consistency.
That's a very likely factor, yeah. It played to the AI's strengths. Also, the study used scripted patient actors in simulated scenarios. Real patients are unpredictable.
Definitely.
They might present symptoms differently, have multiple coexisting conditions, provide incomplete or even contradictory information, forget things, change their minds, and have genuine, complex emotional responses that go beyond a script. AMIE hasn't been tested in unscripted, complex, real-world interactions with actual patients, which is a crucial next step for validation.
That makes sense. What about the risk of the AI just making things up? We hear about hallucinations with LLMs all the time.
That's a known vulnerability of all large language models, and it's a serious concern in medicine. While fine-tuning on medical data and the chain-of-thought mechanism help ground AMIE's responses and make it less likely to hallucinate compared to a general LLM.
But the risk isn't zero.
The risk is absolutely not zero. The possibility of generating incorrect or fabricated information is always present. In the controlled study, this risk was lower due to the structured cases and focused training, but ensuring absolute factual accuracy and safety in all possible real-world scenarios remains an ongoing, critical challenge. The AI needs reliable ways to express uncertainty or know when to defer to a human.
Saying, I don't know, is important for a doctor, human, or AI.
Hugely important.
And how representative were the cases or the patient actors used in the study? Could there be bias there?
Generalizability is another key limitation. The study used, I think, 159 case scenarios. While covering a decent range of common conditions seen in primary care, they can't represent the full complexity of all possible medical presentations, rare diseases, or the vast diversity of patient populations globally.
So it might work well for these cases, but what about others?
Exactly. There's a need to ensure AMIE performs consistently and equitably across different demographics, ethnicities, genders, age ranges, socioeconomic backgrounds, different languages, cultures, and in different clinical settings where disease prevalence might vary. Bias in the training data or evaluation cases is a significant risk that needs careful mitigation.
And finally, the study was text only, but medicine often requires more than just conversation, right? Seeing, touching.
Right. Diagnosis frequently involves physical examination, listening to the lungs, feeling the abdomen, reviewing medical images like x-rays or skin photos, or analyzing lab results. The version of AMIE tested in this benchmark study was purely text only. It operated solely on the conversational data provided by the patient actor.
So its impressive performance was achieved without any visual or physical input.
Correct. Which is remarkable in one sense, but also highlights a significant limitation for real-world comprehensive diagnosis, where those inputs are often essential.
Okay, so a breakthrough result showing incredible potential in a controlled conversational setting, but with really important caveats regarding the text format, simulated nature, potential for errors, bias, and lack of multimodal input in that specific study. Now, you mentioned that at the time of that study, AMIE was text only, but there have been some very recent developments, haven't there? Specifically around May and June 2025, making it more powerful.
Yes, exactly. This is where AMIE takes a significant step towards bridging that multimodal gap you just mentioned, moving beyond just text. In May 2025, Google Research announced a major upgrade. Multimodal AMIE.
Multimodal, meaning it can handle more than just text now, like images.
Precisely. It means the AI is no longer limited to just words. It can now process and integrate other types of data, most notably images, but also potentially other formats, alongside the conversational input.
Okay, that sounds like a big deal for medical use.
It's a huge deal. It makes it far more capable in a diagnostic context that often relies heavily on visual or other non-textual information.
How does it do that? What's the technology enabling this?
This capability is powered by leveraging Google DeepMind's most advanced foundation models, like the Gemini family. These models are designed from the ground up to be multimodal. They can understand and reason across text, images, audio, and video simultaneously.
So AMI now has eyes, essentially.
You could think of it that way. It allows multimodal AAA to not just see an image, but understand its context within the ongoing medical conversation and reason about it.
Can you walk us through a hypothetical example of how multimodal ANI might interact differently now?
Certainly. Let's use a common scenario.
Yeah.
Imagine you're chatting with Amy about a skin problem, maybe an unusual mole you're concerned about.
Okay.
In the past, text-only Amy could only ask you to describe it. Is it raised? What color is it? How big? Which can be subjective and difficult for a patient.
Right. My idea of big might be different from a doctor's.
Exactly. But multimodal AMI can intelligently recognize that visual information is key here. It might ask you, I understand you're concerned about a mole. To help me assess it better, could you please share a clear photo of the mole if you're comfortable doing that?
And you could upload a picture from your phone.
Yes. When you upload the picture, the AI's vision capabilities analyze the image. It doesn't just store it, it analyzes features. It could then incorporate that analysis directly back into the dialogue.
How would that sound?
It might say something like, thank you for sharing the photo. Based on the image, I see an irregular-shaped mole that appears to be about 8 millimeters across, with some variation in color. That visual information is very helpful. Now, can you tell me, does the mole itch or has it bled at all?
Wow. That's a game changer. It's not just receiving an image passively, it's analyzing it and integrating that analysis into the structured diagnostic conversation, asking smarter follow-up questions based on what it sees.
Precisely. It can see features in the image, like the irregularity or color variation in the mole example, that might be difficult for a patient to describe accurately. It uses that visual information to ask more targeted questions, narrowing down the possibilities much more effectively.
What else besides skin photos?
The sources mentioned it can also interpret other common medical imagery, like X-rays, potentially identifying fractures or pneumonia, or integrate information from PDF documents like lab results, pulling out key values and discussing them within the conversational flow.
So it could look at your lab report PDF and say, I see your cholesterol's a bit high.
That's the kind of capability being developed, yes. This advancement was publicly highlighted and demonstrated with examples at Google I/O 2025, showcasing its image reasoning capabilities woven seamlessly into simulated medical dialogues.
So this moves AMI significantly closer to replicating a more complete initial clinical assessment where visual and data cues are often crucial. Is it still learning through that flight simulator method?
Yes, absolutely. They are continuing to scale up that innovative self-play training process for this enhanced multimodal model. It's now capable of simulating thousands of complex cases daily, including scenarios that specifically incorporate visual or document-based information alongside the text dialogue.
So it's constantly practicing these more complex multimodal consultations.
Exactly, allowing for continuous refinement and expansion of its capabilities across a wider range of real-world scenarios.
Okay, so we have a conversational diagnostic AI that performed remarkably well against doctors in a text-only simulation and has now gained the crucial ability to interpret images and other data within the conversation. How does AME compare to some of the other major AI systems we've heard about in the healthcare space? Where does it fit in the landscape? It feels unique.
It does have a specific focus. It's helpful to understand that different medical AI systems often have different primary goals or strengths. AMI's core strength, based on the research we've discussed, lies specifically in simulating an interactive conversational diagnostic consultation with the patient and demonstrating high performance, including on communication metrics in that specific setting.
Okay, let's look at some others for contrast. What about MedPal M2, which also came from Google and got a lot of press?
Right. MedPal M2 was primarily positioned as an expert question and answer system. It was incredibly impressive at absorbing vast amounts of medical knowledge and performing at an expert level on medical exams, like the U.S. medical licensing exam.
So, great at tests.
Exactly. You could ask it complex medical questions, and it would provide detailed, accurate answers, synthesizing information from its training data. But it wasn't designed primarily to conduct a multi-turn diagnostic dialogue with a patient. It didn't really focus on asking follow-up questions dynamically or building a clinical history from scratch through conversation.
So it was more like a super intelligent medical search engine or reference book.
That's a good way to think about it. A brilliant medical knowledge retrieval and synthesis tool, but not intrinsically a conversational clinician in the way AI aims to be.
Okay, so MedPolum 2 is the knowledgeable medical scholar, while AME is trying to be the practicing clinician having a dialogue. What about general purpose models like GPT-4? People are using it for all sorts of things, including medical queries.
Right. Models like GPT-4 are extremely powerful and versatile large language models. They have demonstrated impressive medical knowledge. They can also pass medical licensing exams, and they can certainly generate empathetic-sounding text if prompted correctly. But they weren't purpose-built or specifically fine-tuned and validated for clinical dialogue according to established medical norms and safety protocols in the same way AMI is being researched. They generally lack inherent built-in medical guardrails, meaning, as general LLMs, they can be more prone to generating plausible-sounding but incorrect information hallucinations, especially on complex medical topics, unless they are very carefully prompted and their outputs are filtered or reviewed by experts. They are incredibly powerful tools that can be applied to healthcare tasks, but they don't have the explicit clinical alignment, the specialized dual-agent reasoning structure, or the safety focus through targeted training like self-play with critique that a system like AMIE is being researched for. It's maybe like comparing a brilliant generalist medical student, GPT-4, to a seasoned clinician trained for a specific task, AMIE's goal.
Okay, that distinction makes sense. What about Hippocratic AI? Their name suggests a focus on medical ethics and safety.
Yes, Hippocratic AI is another notable player in this space, and they've explicitly prioritized safety and achieving human-like bedside manner from the outset. They've highlighted their models, passing many healthcare professional exams and certifications, focusing on safety benchmarks.
So, very safety conscious. How does their focus compare to AMIE's?
Their initial focus, based on public information, has often seemed to be on slightly lower risk, perhaps non-diagnostic applications. First, things like helping with patient outreach, post-discharge follow-up, explaining procedures, or maybe assisting with administrative tasks. They seem to be building trust and ensuring safety in these roles before tackling the high-stakes complexity of primary diagnosis head-on. So strong on safety and empathy communication, but perhaps not yet demonstrating the same level of simulated diagnostic performance against clinicians as seen in the AMIE benchmark study. Different starting points, maybe.
Right, maybe focusing on different entry points into the healthcare system. And going back further, what about older systems like IBM Watson Health, specifically Watson for Oncology? That got a lot of hype years ago.
Watson for Oncology
Yeah.
is often brought up as a cautionary tale in some ways.
Why is that?
It was an earlier generation AI, more reliant on curated data and rule-based systems than today's LLMs. It attempted to use AI to match patient data against vast amounts of medical literature and clinical trial data to suggest cancer treatment options.
Sounds useful in theory.
In theory, yes. However, it famously struggled with several issues in real-world deployment. Clinicians found it difficult to integrate into their workflows, the recommendations weren't always easy to interpret or trust, and sometimes it produced recommendations based on outdated or irrelevant data, or even made significant errors because it couldn't grasp the full patient context.
So it didn't quite live up to the initial promise.
It faced significant challenges. It serves as a really important example demonstrating the critical need for AI in medicine, not just to be accurate in theory, but also highly reliable in practice, transparent where possible about its reasoning, and seamlessly integrated into actual clinical workflows to be truly useful. These are lessons that newer LLM-based systems like AMIE, with their conversational abilities and internal reasoning chains, are trying to build upon.
So putting it all together, while other systems excel in specific areas like pure knowledge recall, MedPolum 2, general language flexibility, GPT-4, or a safety-first approach in specific roles, Hippocratic AI, AMI's current standout contribution seems to be its demonstrated high performance specifically against human doctors in a simulated conversational diagnostic setting, combined with an architecture explicitly designed for that interactive clinical reasoning loop.
That head-to-head benchmark study, even with its limitations, and the focus on replicating the process of diagnostic conversation is what currently distinguishes AMIE in the research landscape among these notable medical AI efforts. It's setting a high bar for conversational diagnostic AI.
Okay, we've explored what AMI is, how it works, its really surprising performance in that simulation, and its recent multimodal upgrade making it even more capable. This all sounds incredibly promising, potentially transformative for healthcare access and quality. But, and it's a big but, bringing a research system like this into the complex, high-stakes reality of patient care must involve enormous challenges and significant friction points. What are the major hurdles to potentially deploying AMI in the real world? This can't be easy.
No, it's definitely not easy. The journey from a successful research simulation, however impressive, to a clinical tool used safely and effectively with real patients is long, complex, and fraught with challenges. There are major practical, ethical, regulatory, and safety considerations that must be addressed rigorously before anything like this sees widespread use.
Okay, let's break those down. Let's start with the obvious one, handling sensitive patient information. Health data is incredibly private.
Data security and patient privacy are absolutely paramount, non-negotiable. Medical information is among the most sensitive personal data there is. Any system interacting with patients, storing their symptoms, history, images. It would need to handle protected health information, PHI, with the utmost care.
Complying with laws like HIPAA.
Exactly. Stringent regulations like HIPAA in the US or GDPR in Europe must be met or exceeded. This means robust end-to-end encryption, strong access controls, data de-identification techniques where appropriate, secure storage practices, and complete transparency with patients about how their data is being collected, used, stored, and protected. A single significant data breach could completely shatter public and professional trust in these systems.
Okay, privacy is huge. What about ensuring fairness, making sure it works well for everyone?
This is a critical ethical dimension and a major area of ongoing research and development for all AI, but especially in healthcare. AI systems learn from data. If the training data, the textbooks, the dialogues, the images, isn't perfectly representative of all populations,
Which it probably isn't.
which it almost certainly isn't, then the AI could inadvertently perform differently, perhaps less accurately or even less safely for certain demographic groups. This could be based on ethnicity, gender, age, socioeconomic background, language, location, you name it.
So it could worsen existing health disparities.
That's the risk. Ensuring performance parity or fairness across diverse patient populations and actively mitigating potential biases embedded in the data or algorithms is absolutely essential for equitable healthcare. This requires rigorous testing and validation in diverse real-world settings, not just relying on simulated data or data from one specific population. Addressing the digital divide in access is also part of this.
What about the risk we touched on earlier, the AI being wrong or giving dangerous advice? How do you manage that?
Managing uncertainty and the potential for errors is arguably the most critical safety challenge. While AMI's internal reasoning and grounding in medical data helps, like any AI, it can still generate inaccurate information or miss something crucial. In medicine, a misdiagnosis or incorrect advice isn't just inconvenient. It can have severe consequences for patient health.
So how do you safeguard against that?
Research is intensely focused on developing reliable ways for the AI to not just provide an answer, but also to communicate its level of certainty or confidence in that answer. It needs to recognize the limits of its own knowledge, identify when a situation is too complex or unusual for its training, and know when to explicitly state, "I don't know the answer to that," or, more importantly, "You need to see a human clinician for this."
Knowing when to escalate.
Precisely. Knowing its limitations and when to defer to human expertise is crucial. The core principle guiding development must always be the medical maxim. First, do no harm. Safety trumps capability every time.
And patients need to know upfront they're talking to an AI, right? Not pretend it's human.
Absolutely. Transparency and informed consent are non-negotiable ethical requirements. Patients must be explicitly informed in clear language if they're interacting with an AI system versus a human. They must understand the system's capabilities and limitations, and they must have the clear right to choose not to use the AI, opting instead for a human clinician, if they prefer.
And the AI should support their decisions.
Yes, the AI should be designed to support patient understanding and autonomy. It should be able to explain its reasoning in a way that helps patients make informed decisions about their own health, rather than just dictating answers.
This raises a huge question. Who is responsible if the AI does make a mistake that harms a patient? Who gets sued?
Accountability and legal liability. That's one of the thorniest issues. And the legal frameworks around AI in medicine are still very much evolving. It's murky territory.
How is it likely to work initially?
In early deployments where AI or similar AI might be used as an assistive tool under direct human supervision, say, suggesting questions or differential diagnoses to a doctor who then makes the final call, the human clinician would likely bear the ultimate responsibility, as they are the ones making the final clinical decision and overseeing the AI's input. They're the licensed professional in charge.
But what if the AI interacts more autonomously?
If the AI were to interact more directly and autonomously with patients, providing diagnoses or treatment advice without immediate human oversight, the question of liability becomes much more complicated. Is it the developer? The hospital that deployed it? The AI itself, which isn't a legal entity? This uncertainty is a major factor influencing the cautious, human-in-the-loop approach to deployment, especially early on. Malpractice law will likely need to adapt significantly.
Okay, so major ethical and liability hurdles. Beyond those, what about just getting it approved for use by regulators like the FDA?
That's another significant hurdle, absolutely. Systems that provide diagnostic information or clinical recommendations are typically classified as medical devices by regulatory bodies like the FDA in the United States or equivalent bodies for CE marking in Europe.
So AMI would be treated like a new drug or medical device.
Essentially, yes. This means AMI would need to undergo formal, rigorous clinical trials in real-world settings, not just simulations with actors, to demonstrate its safety and effectiveness with actual patients before it could be approved for broad clinical use.
And that takes time and money.
A lot of time and a lot of money. Furthermore, because AMI is based on a complex adaptive LLM that might continue to learn or be updated over time, it poses unique challenges for traditional regulatory processes, which are often designed for static software or hardware. Regulators will need robust evidence of its performance, consistency, methods for ongoing monitoring, and clear protocols for managing updates safely.
So getting it through the necessary regulatory pathways will be a long, deliberate, and rigorous process, not something that happens overnight.
Absolutely not. It requires a very deliberate and incremental approach, moving carefully from controlled research settings to extensive real-world clinical validation, gathering safety and efficacy data every step of the way. The developers have indicated they are engaging with regulatory bodies early, which is crucial, but this phase will be demanding and likely take years for significant approvals.
Given all these hurdles, privacy, bias, safety, liability, regulation, it really sounds like a cautious, phased approach to deployment is the only realistic path forward.
That's the widely accepted view among researchers, ethicists, clinicians, and regulators in the field. You don't just unleash something this powerful into healthcare without extreme caution. The journey will likely start with lower-stakes applications and gradual integration, prioritizing safety and building trust at every step.
What might those lower-stakes applications look like?
Initial uses might involve AME acting purely as a tool assisting human clinicians behind the scenes, maybe summarizing patient intake forms, suggesting relevant questions based on initial symptoms, or drafting notes for the doctor to review and edit. Or it could be used in well-defined, highly supervised settings, like helping triage patients in a telemedicine platform or an emergency department queue, where a human nurse or doctor quickly verifies its assessment before any action is taken.
So the immediate future is likely AI as an assistive co-clinician, where the human is firmly in control rather than a fully autonomous AI doctor making decisions alone.
That's the prudent and most probable path forward for the foreseeable future, yes. AMI's potential is seen primarily as augmenting human capability, enhancing efficiency and maybe accuracy, but not replacing human judgment or the human relationship entirely, certainly not anytime soon.
Where might we see the very first trials or pilots?
Early pilots will likely occur within major academic medical centers or large, integrated health systems that have the resources and expertise for careful implementation and research. These sources mentioned potential trials being explored with institutions like a Harvard-affiliated hospital, focusing on specific, contained use cases where the AI can be closely monitored, validated, and its impact studied in a real clinical environment before any broader rollout.
Okay. Let's shift focus a bit from the challenges to the potential upside again. If, and it's still a big if, AMA or similar systems successfully navigate these significant hurdles, gain regulatory approval, and earn the trust of clinicians and patients, what could the real-world impact actually be? How could this technology genuinely change healthcare for the better for both patients and clinicians?
The potential real-world use cases, assuming safety and efficacy are proven, are truly transformative. They circle back to addressing that fundamental global need for accessible medical expertise that we started with.
How can it help doctors directly in their day-to-day work?
One major application is as a powerful diagnostic support tool for clinicians. Imagine AMIE acting like that super resident, or an instant second opinion, always available for consultation right within the workflow.
Okay.
A busy primary care physician seeing a patient with complex or vague symptoms could quickly consult an AMIE. The AI could rapidly review the patient's presented information, maybe even pull relevant data from their electronic health record, and then suggest a broader list of potential diagnoses, the differential diagnosis perhaps including things the doctor might not have immediately thought of under time pressure.
Helping avoid misdiagnoses.
Yeah, exactly. It could also recommend specific, high-yield questions to ask to help rule conditions in or out more efficiently, or even draft preliminary sections of the consultation note for the doctor to review, saving significant time.
Did the research show it helped doctors?
Yes. Studies with an earlier version of AME, used purely as an assistive tool, demonstrated that when clinicians were assisted by the AI in reviewing case information and formulating a differential, their diagnostic accuracy significantly improved. One source mentioned accuracy jumping from around 33% correct on their own to 59% correct with AI assistance on challenging cases.
That's a substantial improvement. That alone could make doctors more effective and potentially help reduce diagnostic errors, which we know are a major source of patient harm in healthcare.
Absolutely. It could also help manage the immense cognitive load clinicians face, reducing burnout by automating some of the mentally demanding aspects of information synthesis and case analysis. This could free up the doctor's mental energy to focus more on the patient interaction, complex decision-making, and the human aspects of care.
Okay, so potential benefits for clinicians. What about for patients seeking initial care or advice? How could it change their experience?
This is where the virtual doctor concept for telemedicine and triage really comes into play, leveraging AI's conversational and now multimodal capabilities. A patient could potentially have access to a high-quality initial health consultation available 24/7 right from their smartphone or computer.
Like a really smart chatbot.
Much smarter. AMI could take a detailed, interactive history, intelligently ask for and interpret photos of a condition like a skin rash or a sore throat using its multimodal features, perhaps even incorporate data from connected devices or uploaded lab results. And then, based on that comprehensive assessment, provide evidence-based advice for self-management if appropriate, or recommend the necessary next level of human care, suggesting they see their GP, go to an urgent care center, or even seek immediate emergency care if red flags are detected.
This could massively improve access, couldn't it? Especially for people in remote areas or those who have trouble getting timely appointments.
Exactly. In areas with significant physician shortages, or even just for common ailments that still cause worry and clog up clinics, a patient could get a reliable, thorough initial assessment quickly without having to travel long distances or wait days or weeks for an appointment.
Can you give a concrete example?
Sure. Think about someone experiencing chest pain at night. They're worried, maybe unsure if it's serious. They could interact with AMI. The AI could quickly and systematically ask about the key features of the pain, associated symptoms, risk factors like smoking or family history. Based on established protocols, if the pattern suggests a high risk of a heart attack, it could strongly recommend calling emergency services immediately, potentially saving a life by accelerating that critical triage step.
That's powerful. And how could it empower patients directly in managing their ongoing health, not just for acute problems?
AME's ability to explain medical information clearly and patiently could be invaluable here. We all know patients often leave a doctor's visit feeling overwhelmed, forgetting details, or having follow-up questions later. An AI like AME could be available anytime to reinforce the doctor's advice, explain a complex medication regimen in simple, understandable terms, answer questions about side effects, or even act as a consistent, non-judgmental coach for managing chronic conditions like diabetes, hypertension, or asthma.
A health coach in your pocket.
Sort of, yeah. Helping patients track their symptoms, understand their readings, adhere to treatment plans, and make lifestyle changes. Some sources noted an interesting psychological point. An AI, unlike a busy human, never gets tired of listening or answering the same question multiple times. Some patients might find that more approachable or less embarrassing for asking basic or repeated questions.
That constant availability and infinite patience could be a real benefit for improving health literacy and adherence to treatment plans.
It definitely could. And think about the potential impact in underserved global areas, which was a driving motivation for this research.
Right, scaling expertise.
In regions with critical shortages of doctors and limited health infrastructure, an AME-like system, accessible via a basic smartphone, maybe even eventually through voice interaction, could act as a vital frontline medical resource. It could empower community health workers, giving them expert-level guidance for assessing and managing common conditions locally, or helping them reliably identify patients who need urgent referral to a higher level of care. It could bring a baseline of expert medical knowledge to places where it's desperately needed.
So it could genuinely help bridge those huge geographical and economic gaps we see in access to quality medical expertise.
That's the hope and the grand vision, precisely. Finally, there's also significant potential in medical training and education. AMIE could serve as a highly sophisticated interactive tool for medical students or trainees. They could practice their history-taking and clinical reasoning skills by simulating diverse patient encounters with the AI, getting feedback on their questioning strategy. Or AMIE could act as a tutor, generating realistic case studies and then walking the student through its own diagnostic thought process, explaining the why behind its reasoning.
Like an infinitely patient teaching assistant.
Exactly.
Okay, the potential applications are vast and exciting, but for any of this to happen in the real world, there's a whole ecosystem of infrastructure and support needed, isn't there? It's not just about having the AI model itself.
Absolutely. That's a critical practical consideration. It's not just plug and play. You need reliable internet connectivity and access to suitable devices, smartphones, tablets, computers, particularly for deployment in underserved or low-resource areas. That digital divide is real.
What else?
You need seamless integration with existing healthcare systems, especially electronic health records, EHRs. For the AI to be most helpful, it needs relevant context from the patient's history, and its findings need to be documented back into the record for continuity of care. That integration is technically challenging.
And within hospitals or clinics?
Healthcare institutions need the IT infrastructure, the data governance policies, and crucially, trained personnel to manage, monitor, and support these AI systems effectively and safely. And users, both clinicians and patients, need proper training on how to interact effectively and safely with an AI co-clinician or virtual assistant. Understanding its capabilities and limitations is key.
And for global use?
For global deployment, localization is essential. That means adapting the AI not just to different languages, but also to different cultural contexts, communication styles, and importantly, local disease patterns and healthcare guidelines, which can vary significantly around the world.
So a lot of groundwork needed beyond just the core AI. What's been the initial reaction from the medical community, doctors, nurses, to AMIE and results like the benchmark study? Are they excited, worried, both?
It's definitely a mix, as you might expect with any potentially disruptive technology in a field like medicine. There's genuine excitement and optimism from many clinicians who see the potential to address major pain points like diagnostic errors, administrative burden, and physician burnout.
They see it as a helpful tool.
Many do. They're open to the idea of an AI partner that can reliably offload routine cognitive tasks, help them stay up to date with the overwhelming volume of medical information, and ultimately enhance the quality and efficiency of the care they provide. The idea of improved accuracy is very appealing.
But also apprehension. What are the main concerns from clinicians?
Understandably, yes, there's apprehension too. There are significant concerns about maintaining the essential human element, the trust, the empathy, the nuanced communication in the doctor-patient relationship if AI becomes too central. Skepticism remains, quite rightly, regarding how well an AI tested in simulations will actually perform in the messy, unpredictable reality of everyday clinical practice.
Will it work with my patients?
Exactly. There are worries about over-reliance on AI potentially leading to de-skilling of clinicians over time or diagnostic errors if the AI is trusted too much. And inevitably, for some, there are underlying concerns about potential job displacement or fundamental changes to their professional roles.
So it seems the consensus, or at least the goal, is very much focused on human-AI collaboration, augmenting doctors rather than replacing them.
That's the clear direction being emphasized by the researchers behind AMIE and both thoughtful commentators in the field. The vision being articulated is one where AI empowers human clinicians, extends their reach, improves their accuracy and efficiency, and expands access to basic care, thereby allowing doctors and nurses to focus more on the most complex cases, on procedural skills, and on the irreplaceable aspects of human connection, judgment, and compassionate care. Augmentation, not replacement.
Looking back at this deep dive, then, it's quite a journey. We started with that common, often frustrating experience of searching symptoms online and feeling lost.
Hmm.
We've explored this specific research project, AAE, that has developed a sophisticated conversational AI capable of conducting detailed medical dialogues. It showed remarkable, almost startling performance against human doctors in a rigorous simulation, even scoring higher on criteria like empathy in that text-based setting.
And importantly, it has recently gained that crucial ability to incorporate visual information images, potentially X-rays, lab reports directly into the diagnostic conversation, making it much more powerful and closer to real-world clinical practice.
It's a powerful demonstration of how advanced AI, particularly LLMs trained in innovative ways like self-play, can be applied to the fundamental challenge of medical history taking and initial diagnosis.
It really is. But as we've discussed, the path from these promising research results to safe, effective, and equitable real-world deployment is complex and requires navigating significant technical, ethical, regulatory, and practical hurdles.
Right. Rigorous safety validation, clinical trials with real patients, regulatory approval, ensuring fairness, protecting privacy, all of that is still ahead.
Absolutely. But the potential prize is huge, addressing global shortages of medical expertise, improving diagnostic accuracy, increasing access to basic healthcare advice, and potentially reducing clinician burnout.
These early results, combined with the ongoing development, suggest a possible future where trusted, high-quality medical guidance could be available almost anytime, anywhere, through our devices. A future where technology might help free up human clinicians to focus on the most critical cases and that invaluable human connection that remains at the heart of healing.
The careful and responsible development of such systems, involving close collaboration between AI researchers, clinicians, patients, ethicists, and regulatory bodies, is absolutely paramount to realizing this potential future safely and effectively. Ensuring these powerful tools truly serve everyone, especially the most vulnerable, must be the guiding principle.
So let's leave you with this thought to ponder as you go about your day. Imagine a world where expert medical advice, skilled, thorough, maybe even perceived as empathetic, could be available at your fingertips 24/7, guiding you through your health concerns. What could that future of healthcare actually look like, and how might it fundamentally change the way we all think about seeking care and maintaining our well-being while still preserving safety and the essence of human care?